Hey everybody, it's lab day. We're going to do lab sink or swim, muscle versus fat. The key concepts we're looking at here is density, so how compact things are, body composition, all of the stuff that makes a human being, and then muscle versus fat. Let's get started. So your body has a lot of different kinds of materials in it, and there are, of course, bone and blood and fat and muscle, just to name a few. But these parts are all hidden away under our skin. So how can we learn more about their qualities? Animals have a lot of the same body parts as we do. So we can learn some interesting things about our bodies by studying something as basic as meat that you can buy in the store. And one fun and easy test to do is examining whether substances float in water, which tells us how buoyant they are. More about buoyancy in a second. So some components of our body are denser than others. And in this activity, we're going to try and discover which is denser than water, muscle or fat. So if a substance is less dense than water, it will be buoyant, which means it's more likely to float. So density is determined by an object's mass or the space that it takes up, its volume. This is why heavy ships can float on water. They're big enough to have an overall density that is less than water. But if you crushed them down into and got rid of all the empty space, that metal ball would sink like a rock. Within most human and animal bodies, whether fat or bone or blood, there's a lot of water, and this means our bodies are really close to the density of water. But this activity can help us explain why some people and animals are more buoyant than others. Human bodies are composed of a variety of tissue types. What do you notice about the pictograph here of the human body? Let's talk about our hypothesis. So I want you to be following along with the lab. Hopefully you've uploaded it to Notability. But if you put, you're gonna want to focus your lab. So it doesn't matter to me if you focus on muscle or if you focus on fat, but we're going to write our hypothesis. So if we choose one tissue type, muscle or fat, and we think it's going to either float or sink in water. If it floats, it's less dense than water. If it sinks, it's more dense than water. Make sure your hypothesis matches with the floating and the sinking. The materials you're going to need for this lab is a piece of meat, and you're going to need both muscle and fat. You're going to need a knife to cut the meat, a piece of bread, a large clear container, and some water. Now, if you're doing this at home, I need you to do parent supervision around this. Otherwise, just watch the video and you can get all the data you need from the video. So in the procedure, we're going to fill up the clear glass or cup with water. We're going to tear off 2 pieces of bread that are about the same size. Set one on the counter just as it is and smash the other one into a dense ball. Carefully cut a piece of fat off of the meat and then cut another piece of lean meat that's about the same size as the fat. Now place the piece of animal fat in the water. What happens? Record that in your data table. Now put the piece of lean meat or muscle in the water. What happens now? Record that in your data table. Now take the unsmashed bread. Put that in the water. What happens? Record that in your data table. Remove that piece of bread and take that densely packed ball of smashed bread. Put that in the water. Now what happens? Record that in your data table. Here's the video.
following the procedure for the sink or swim.
So to start, we have the water.
Lab. The first thing you're going to do is fill a clear container with water. You're going to tear off, you're going to have 2 pieces of bread.
Here's the 2 pieces of
about
bread.
This size.
We're going to put one on the table.
One on the counter as it is.
Take that other piece
Take
of
the
bread
other
and
one
smash it
and
into a ball.
Smash it in.
We're removing all the air. We're making it
Dense
really
ball.
dense. So save that. Now take the animal fat. Let's put it in the
Carefully cut
water
off a piece of
and
fat
see what happens.
and a piece of muscle meat.
This is
All right, here we go. So place the piece of animal fat in the water. Record what happens.
record that in your data
Does it
table.
sink?
Now I'm going to
Right back to
remove
data
that
table.
piece of fat. And now I'm going to put the piece of lean muscle
Now-
meat in.
Take the muscle meat, put that in the water. Does it float? Does it sink?
Now record that in
Record
your
that
data
in
table.
your data table.
We get that piece of meat out. Oh. Now we're going to put the piece of
Take the piece of
unsmashed bread
unsmashed
in the
bread.
water.
Put that in the water. Does it float or does it sink? Okay.
Take it out.
Record that in your data table.
What do you think is going to happen to that piece of densely smashed bread?
Now take the
Let's
dense
find out.
piece of bread. Does it float? Or
Okay,
does it
record
sink?
that.
Record that
Put that in your data table. Here's what your data table should look like. You can use the words yes and no to fill out the data table, or you could just put an X. So did the piece of fat float or did it sink? Did the piece of muscle meat float or sink? Did the unsmashed bread float or sink? And did the smashed bread float or sink? Next thing you got to do. What are the safety concerns for this lab? Was there anything sharp, dangerous, spill risks? We were using food. What's our rule about food in the lab? And how about some general safety ideas? Explain what safety things we need to be aware of. Now you've got some analysis questions to do. So the first one, why did the 2 different materials from the meat that were about the same size, thus they had the same volume, do different things in water? So even though both pieces of meat had the same volume, the piece of fat was less dense. The molecules were more spread out than the piece of lean muscle meat. Number 2, how could the 2 pieces of bread that started out the same, thus they had about the same mass, do different things in water? What was the difference? Number 3, if an object has a greater density than water, it sinks. If it's less dense than water, it floats. Which type of body material, muscle or fat, had a greater density? That means it sank than water. And which one had a lower density? That meant it floated. Number 4, some animals live in the ocean and they have a thick layer of fat called blubber. Blubber helps these animals stay warm. But how might it also affect a whale or a manatee in the water? What might the fat help them do? Now, the last question, before you answer it, I want you to see the optional classroom demo. Let's see. Here we go. So in this demonstration, we have 2 beakers of water.
Dissolve salt.
We're going to put salt in the first beaker of water and dissolve that salt.
One of the beakers of water.
So let me get my salt.
To model salty water. So I'm going to pour salt.
I'm going to pour it in. Make it very salty. And we're going to mix it up. This simulates an ocean because the ocean is a very salty place. So we have 1 beaker of salt water and 1 beaker of fresh water. Now we're going to take an egg.
We have a salt
we're going to use that egg
and a not salt beaker
to simulate an animal or a person.
So even if you haven't changed your body composition, you are less dense relative to salt water, which helps you float on the surface. To demonstrate this, filling 2 glasses, one with salt, one without salt, and then gently putting an egg into each. So first the egg into the not salty water.
First, we'll put it in the unsalty water.
And as you can
what
see,
does the egg do? Does it float or does it sink?
And then
now we'll put an egg in the salty water.
Egg, put it into the salty water.
Does the egg float or does it sink?
Floats.
Coming back to these questions. So question number 5 is, have you ever been swimming in the ocean or a salty sea? If you have, what might you have noticed that it's easier to stay afloat in salty water than it is in a lake or a pond or a swimming pool? Why is that? Okay. Now that we've got your analysis questions answered, let's go on to claim. Claim is 1 sentence long. 1 sentence. What did you observe from this lab? What did you observe between the muscle and the fat? What do you notice? What's the difference? In the evidence, I want you to start off with I observed. I observed, and turn your data table into words. I need at least 4 sentences. 1 about muscle, 1 about fat, 1 about smashed bread, and 1 about unsmashed bread. So 4 sentences in your evidence section. And finally, claim. Why did it happen this way? What is the science that explains the phenomena? I would like you to go back and use those words that we talked about in the beginning. Density, body composition, muscle, and fat. Got it? If you have questions, make sure that you're asking your teacher for help. We can't wait to see what you come up with.